Welcome to Land Language, the podcast transforming landscapes from toxic to regenerative. We're your host, Britt from Blueprint Earth,
and co-host Bethany from Bethany Rydmark Landscapes.
We explore beautiful, functional design through conversations with scientists, vendors, contractors, and designers who are changing the industry.
Whether you're in the field or at the drafting table, join us as we explore regenerative practices that care for people, place, and planet.
Let's dig in. So today we get the honor of talking with Brittney Herrera. She is the CEO at Thunder Egg and also the lead and CEO at GeoTune. You're an author, you're a speaker, and you come with an interior architecture background. You look like a data-focused person on paper. Mm-hmm. And then there's this not secret part of you that's GeoTune. And to me, it is clearly why you've been successful at making such an impact in the field in interior architecture. But also one of the practices I hear you talk about that you feel like you are an absolute expert at is creating high-performing workspaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. My background for 25 years is in interior architecture for, Fortune 500 companies, mostly tech, right? So I love working with those types of companies. I love making environments for them where people really want to be. We talk about creating magnetic spaces, places where people can perform at their peak. They're all working on these really amazing missions and changing the world for the better, we hope, right? So that's what we like to contribute to, these incredible teams and giving them spaces that are going to really work for them. This is just another layer for that. I feel like a lot of really high-performing CEOs and C-suite executives are into meditation, right? They talk about their sacred hour, that first hour of the day when they get clear, they meditate. That's connecting with intention, and they see how focused intention and attention moves the needle for them and their businesses. And this is just another layer of that frequency, bringing that energy and mindfulness to the built environment, to space, to land, in a way that was lost for a long time and that's been interpreted for modern living. We don't just avoid areas of geopathic stress anymore because we build everywhere. We really need to have the ability to tune that space, and that's what we do with the copper.
Britt, when you started doing this, you really found that this wasn't something that you were taught to do in interior architecture school. This maybe kind of came down the line of feng shui, but it really was something different, and it had an ancient practice aligned with it. Can you tell me a bit about how you ended up picking up and believing in this ancient practice?
Sure. When I first learned about this work, I was skeptical, maybe healthy skeptical, open, interested. And what I learned really came through taking a leap of faith and tuning my own property and seeing the results. So seeing the trees that started to heal where there were lines of stress, the headaches that went away because I had a line of stress running through my pillow at night, right? I mean, I feel like if nothing else, we got that. And the rest of my family had their own, points of geopathic stress running throughout the house where they were. And bit by bit, it just started to lift the vibration of the property, and the business started to do better, and all of these wonderful magical things, that maybe could have just been attested to, like my one little case study started to happen. And then I started doing my friends and my family's houses, and they had their own stories, and I was like, this is amazing. And their stories were maybe even more interesting and powerful. And then eventually we started doing it for clients, right? And that was really, really interesting to see how commercial properties were responding and how teams were gelling and how, their landscapes were affected in their mechanical equipment, because geopathic stress really can wreak havoc on electrical systems and mechanical systems.
And I look at the most wealthy and the most high-performing individuals that I've gotten to know being in high school in Malibu, California, and living in Telluride, Colorado, where the level of person you're talking about who either wants to be a C-suite one day or is a C-suite, meditation, biohacking in whatever way they're doing,
Yeah.
self-care,
Yep.
and energetics are 4 essential pillars of their lifestyle.
Mhm.
And when I think about geopathic stress, this is not something that's left off that table. This is something that is they know about. They're clearly inviting into their homes because they know that the vibration of the space
Mhm.
is so vital to their ability to move their life forward.
Right. And just having that awareness, and bringing us in at a time that's really important for their teams and their like personal homes as well is so important, and they really see the difference. So there's no convincing there. They get it for sure.
So you've gotten to work on these Michelin hotels,
Mhm.
specifically the Atticus, correct?
Yes, they got a Michelin key in the year that we tuned.
Hmm.
That's pretty telling.
And number 3 on TripAdvisor.
Love
So we're
that.
so excited for them. Yeah, they've definitely seen that needle move.
What did you see in their revenue and in their space and their equipment
Mhm.
after your tuning there?
Yeah, well, it's a great case study. We recently posted it on our website, and we've got the benefit of following them for a full year, which I really wanted. I wanted to make sure that this work was long lasting in its effects. And when we first came on the scene, the restaurant was struggling. They'd had a lot of turnover, which I think is pretty common in the hospitality industry.
Mhm.
But they just felt like it was off. And, the owners were open to an energetic solution, right? So they'd already done a lot of energetic work on the property, and it felt great in the hotel, but we could see where there was a lot of geopathic stress in the restaurant and some stuck energy. So moving that out, we saw, and we're grateful they were able to share some data with us about having a massive jump in revenue. I think they had their first profitable month in the restaurant the month after we tuned, which is no small feat.
No, that's amazing,
What a
especially in restaurant.
Yes, like
Yeah.
just the testament to harmony. And I guess
Yeah.
harmony as a concept and it applies in all these places in business, on the land, in our spaces, in our lives. When things are harmonious, they're useful and they're beautiful and they're nourishing. And
Yeah.
like each piece of it plays its part.
And people want to be there.
That's right.
Yeah. And they show up and they come back and they just want to sit in that energy. And I think that that's really powerful. And so then we had their architect come in and say, "Oh my gosh, it feels so good in here." And then they'd had a group, people do group bookings. So the leader of that group came back into the hotel after not having been there previously before we had tuned. And he's like, "Oh my God, what did you do? It's so different. The energy is so good here now." So people that are sensitive, can really feel it right away. And then I think the rest of like people who aren't maybe super sensitive just know that they like going there, that it feels good. Yeah.
And so now you're tuning all over the world. So this isn't
Mhm.
limited to just the Pacific Northwest. This is, I mean, you're doing one in Bali
Yes.
next week or today. You're doing another one locally. You've
Mhm.
worked in Tibet. You've worked with Atticus hotels all over. Like, what does it look like to work with you no matter where you're at?
Yeah, so we can do this work anywhere, and people that have seen the transformation when we're not like live, local, in person, they just feel like so elevated by it, and their life transforms in ways that we can't predict, right? Because energy work is so unique to every individual. But they'll tell their story, and then the next thing you know, we're doing an Ayurveda center in Nepal, or doing a home in the UK that will not sell, right? And then all of a sudden, we know why. Um, yeah, so because of the remote viewing that we can do, we can walk a property ahead. And I've been working for a really long time with the Monroe Institute to develop my abilities and tune in and go deeper with meditation. But it's that remote viewing class that I took with them that I feel like really enabled me to do this work remotely. And it's so special just to have that ability and to know that other people that are doing that remote viewing work, they're doing it in their own way, but it's working consistently for them as well. The person that I studied with finds lost children, with his abilities. I find geopathic stress, so not maybe as important, but still, I love that I can do that and then offer this service, worldwide.
So when you come to a home and it's not a remote service,
Hmm.
it kind of looks the same, but it's just you're physically there or not physically there. Can you tell us about what showing up and walking a land looks like? Because
Hmm.
in my experience of receiving this, you've done a lot of work before you even show up.
Yeah, so before I even arrive, maybe the week before, I'll walk the property with the remote viewing with my mind's eye. I'll tune in, I'll see what I find for geopathic stress or EMF or positive and negative vortexes. We'll check the whole property, and so I know what I'm walking into when I do show up in person, whether that's on a Zoom with a client or in person. And then when I get there, we'll take some time to just collect our energy together and align. We'll meditate together and just give thanks for this amazing ability that this is available to us. And then I'll walk with the dowsing rods. I'll walk the property in two directions to find all of the lines of stress, confirm, that the ones that I viewed remotely are in the right spot. And then we'll place the rods together. I like to bury them. They're just a 1 cubit long copper rod. Looks like a little earth needle. Um, and then once they're buried and all cured, we kind of close that energy up and it's good to go.
And when I've been with you and received it at my house, I think the most impressive thing that I saw was that we had a flood the year before and spent tens of thousands of dollars on remediating, accepting water coming in the house, which as a stormwater expert is like the very last line of defense. And so then we had another flood this year
Mhm.
with the remediation in place. And what I found is that this is groundwater. It's something that I can't manage underneath my house.
Mhm.
And I have to make sure that we deal with it. But there's no way I can deal with it
Mhm.
unless I start to dig underneath my house. And so you came in after an atmospheric river, after the flood, after we ripped everything out. And we did a geopathic tuning. We did a GeoTune with you. There was 3 more atmospheric rivers since then.
How'd it go?
Haven't had any water come into our
Yay.
basement. Yeah. Pretty
Great.
impressive.
Yeah. So geopathic stress can be attributed to many things, but underground water, uh, underground ore, minerals, things like that, underground fault lines, right? So those are the main ones that we see. And when we smooth out that line of stress, it really has a big impact, right, on all of the systems that we build above.
It's like that pinched nerve,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yep. It's acupuncture for the land,
Mhm.
for sure. Yep.
And so when you show up to people's projects, are there any objections they have to working with you?
Hmm.
Especially because it feels kind of woo, you know?
Yeah, it can be very woo. And I think because, how I came at this work was very logical and pragmatic. And after they hear kind of my story of how that all came to be and my background in the built environment, I think that it opens the door for them to legitimacy.
Mhm.
And then we have a lot of data, a lot of empirical evidence, a lot of case studies and stories and friends telling them, about their experience. So it's not really from me. It doesn't have to be about, what I'm saying, this is great, you should do it. It's all of their transformational stories that really come to the fore. And for people that a lot of people give this as a gift. It's a popular housewarming gift, as you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So
Realtors, listen up.
and to sell real estate, it's very popular.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll come in and maybe the homeowner wasn't the one who kicked off the conversation, but it was their friend. And so they're kind of in a suspending of belief, right? Until they see what happens. And then bit by bit, they start to put the pieces of the puzzle together themselves. Oh, this line of stress is going through a dead tree. This line of stress is going through this area I just don't use. It makes a lot of sense. And then they're like, okay, that was fun. And then they get the after effect, the afterglow
Mm.
of geotuning, which is that raising of the vibration on the whole property. And then all of the things that start to come to them and resolve, and things that, they might be struggling with their health too. I'm not saying that geopathic stress cures everything, right? Like remediating it, but whatever you're doing with your doctor, with your practitioner, maybe starts to work a little better, right? And that's been our experience.
I mean, I can only speak to my numbers too, which I think is in addition to what you've just shared, is
Hmm.
like the ROI on not just the tuning, but on the aftermath. Like we are 23% higher this time of year than we were last year, this time of year,
Yay.
which is pretty awesome,
Hmm.
right? And that was through our worst season of the year,
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
I
Right.
cannot tell you how excited I'm going to be when we hit October,
Mhm.
and we're at the end of Q3 and I'm telling you our
Yeah.
numbers at that point.
And for the Atticus, when we were in those first early months, when we were tracking their data, they were up, a good chunk when the rest of the industry was down,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
right? So, I mean, the gap between that was pretty impressive.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, I love it. And you've shared this with some of your clients too, Bethany. Can you tell us a little bit about like why you've shared this with clients and how you've felt since doing your own home?
Right. I'm thinking specifically of the one that I invited you out to, and we met the clients and just talked about the real challenging part of having to remove trees from a project. We don't
Right.
always get to work on a project where everything remains, well, obviously it doesn't remain as is, but we don't always get to nurture and continue what we would imagine as forward growth, right? Some things are going to be removed, some things are going to
Mhm.
make way for the next layer of construction. But the
Right.
difference in doing that again from the top down, all right, here's our tree removal plan, take them out, see ya, goodbye. I thought it was interesting. The same week you and I were on that property, I had just gone to listen to Robin Wall Kimmerer. She'd come to visit town and was speaking again just about relationship and speaking with our with our tree kin
Yeah.
and letting them know. And this is part of what we did together with our clients,
Hmm.
letting the trees know they'll be gone, but that gives them the opportunity to start making their own changes in relationship with one another on the land.
Right.
And I'd love to hear for other listeners more of your stories about that. That's what I
Yeah.
get really excited about bringing to clients because it
Hmm.
opens a whole new awareness. And even long after the project is done and the dust is settled,
Hmm.
there's an aliveness and an awareness in their hearts about what's around them and what they get to maintain
Yeah.
relationship with.
Well, it does take us to a more woo place
Yeah. Yeah.
that I really hadn't thought about, right, or considered on this journey. And I always really stayed in the okay, let's remediate the geopathic stress and ABCD. This is what we're doing. Um, but the more anyone who's gotten into meditation and kind of this intuition that can come in when we stop talking, it would be familiar with kind of these downloads, these ideas, and that's what happened with Bethany and her trees. So I was not really thinking about this at all, but as I was tuning into the property remotely, the trees were very they made me cry. Like they didn't want to go, and I hadn't experienced that before, and it was really surprising, like this wave of emotion that came in, and it definitely wasn't me, and I had to really think about, okay, what was that? And kind of confirming with my dowsing rods, like what I was feeling and seeing, and then how to help, right? How to facilitate and how to navigate that conversation with these incredible beings and come to, like, I feel like I brokered a negotiation here, like with these trees and how they were going to move on and how they were going to still support the land with the new things that were coming in, and that energy doesn't just die, it transmutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of maybe making that available for them, one path and in partnership
Mm-hmm.
of how that was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we did, and I feel like we got to a really great place with them, and I felt their peace in me, and what a relief, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know how that was going to go.
Right.
And we've done other properties too where people have experienced sickness, and we found, some energy there that was really kind of manipulating the geopathic stress lines and making them bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? And a lot of people in this area had gotten ill. And we ended up doing an offering to that energy, and that satisfied them. That remediated all of the geopathic stress without even placing a line because they were they were behind it. So yes, amazing things happen, no two alike. um, and that's what makes this work so fun and fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I think this kind of goes to your point too, Bethany, when you started your piece of the conversation is like, you want to know how to sell this to people
Mm,
because you know that they need it. Like, I think of a client right now that I have who has this beautiful home. It's their sanctuary. It's something they're building for themselves. They've lived their life in the military and they just find that like they really need peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, here, like this, I
mhm,
can help you with all the beauty, sexy, get you into the garden where you will find peace, but
Mm-hmm.
this will help you internally.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to know from you, being a believer, like just because I grew up in this world, and I absolutely understand what
yeah,
you're saying and what you're doing. And I hope that this really gets the message across to people who are just curious and don't really know how or why or what the benefit is. But I want to know from you, like, how do I bring somebody along the journey
mhm,
that says, I know this can really help you and this is like worth way more than the investment in it.
mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that we end up aligning with people who are interested in this work. Bethany didn't necessarily know that her client was already doing Monroe meditations. And,
Oh, that's
like,
so cool.
right?
Yes.
So they were on board, right? And how fun for me because then we're all kind of reading from the same sheet music. Um, but I think that people that are really skeptical about it, it might not be for them first. And then, second, energy work requires permission. So, even if, you're excited for someone, it might not be part of their journey yet,
Mm-hmm.
just to be transparent about that. Maybe it's in a month. And we've had people come back around a year later, be like, I was really curious about this and I'd love to learn more when it was time for them. Um, and then, layering it into projects, I think just as part of an offering, right, is a great way to go too, because you're doing this energetic work with the land and this partnership with growing things, right? And those want to be supported by not having to face geopathic stress and maybe taking advantage of the positive vortexes that are there, if there are any, and certainly remediating any negative vortexes. So it can be, a choice by the landscape design team, to incorporate that into the practice. And I find a lot of landscape designers are already well aware
Mm-hmm.
of the woo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're literally working with these beings of the land every day. And to not see the restorative and healing effects of what Mother Nature provides, would be, a little incongruous. So,
I wish I could travel back in time. I didn't know about your work when I planted my own hedge line in my backyard, I think 12 years ago this spring. And it's funny because the one beautiful plant that just pooped out and died and it didn't matter what we did, it was gone. the entire rest of this hedge now, a decade plus later, is luscious and glorious. And sure enough, before you came over, then I wonder what we'll discover here. And sure enough, guess what? There's a line that had run right through that, and it's
That
been
she saw.
remediated now. I haven't tried to put anything new back in that spot, but
Yeah,
I'm
you
actually
should do
kind of
it.
curious. I should go
Yeah.
and get
Did
a
she?
replacement and see. Oh, she
Saw it before.
she saw it before she came.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then confirmed it on site. And of course,
Yeah.
but again, I didn't know then. Trial and error. We grew what we grew, but now
Right.
it would be a really fun season to put
Mhm.
that replacement in and see if it does well.
It's so fun. I've done it in my own backyard and like great. So I replaced a tree 3 times. Like, I don't know why this isn't working. And then I finally learned about it. It's amazing.
And that's so cool because so many people are like, "Oh, the soil's bad. The soil's bad. The soil."
Mhm,
That
mhm.
and
Oh, yeah, the soil. So we did a 20-acre flower farm
Mhm.
in Hood River. And it was very dead land. The part of it was so dry, and then another part of it was completely underwater. And they had so much energetic stress. I feel like I placed a cure every 3 feet.
Mhm.
It was everywhere. And when we were done remediating it, I was like, there are a couple of additional layers after a property can come up to a certain vibration, we can come back in and tune a little bit more. And we did that for them. And they reported back that the mushrooms were growing everywhere
Mm.
on the land now. And that soil biodiversity,
Yes.
like, it's just such a testament to what raising the vibration will do,
Mhm.
and I think that has incredible implications
Mhm.
for agriculture,
Mhm.
our food supply.
Yes.
I would love somebody to study the soil before and after.
yes, please.
What's
Yes.
happening? I would love that data.
Right.
I
I
want to
would
get you
too.
plugged in with larger scale agriculture and get some
Yes.
of these case studies. The Willamette
Yeah.
Valley is
Yeah.
an incredible place, number one, just in
Right.
general. But think about how much
Mhm.
improved in harmony and alignment. That would
Amazing.
be
So my party trick for non-believers, and I can't believe it took me this long to remember this. So I have a copper tensor ring. If anyone's ever seen them, they're just like a little bracelet-sized ring, and the copper is twisted so that it's still that magical 1 cubit long.
mm,
But it creates this little tiny positive vortex, and if you put a bottle of wine in one of those, and then you have like a control bottle of wine, and then you pour samples, let it sit for, 15 minutes, and then you pour samples from each bottle, the bottle in the tensor ring tastes so much better. It's incredible.
we should have done an afternoon podcast.
I know.
Why aren't we doing this now? It's wild though.
Yeah,
I've heard you share this, and it's just wild to think about
it's
that
amazing.
immediate impact.
Yes. And I think for me, I wear a tensor ring if ever I'm feeling under the weather. It oxygenates your blood, like it just makes you feel better. And I think it's doing the same thing to the wine. I think it's oxygenating it. So I don't know how it works, but I have tasted the difference.
Mhm.
Others have tasted the difference.
Others have tasted the difference.
Yeah.
It's super fun.
How do people get connected with you and find a way that to learn about what you're delivering and how they could take the next step?
Yeah. Well, we are at geotune.com and you can book a discovery call. Reach out on the website. We have a form there. You can email, it goes right to me, align@geotune.com. And we have case studies that we're constantly publishing. There's a Substack called Aligned Spaces that we're reporting out all of our case studies and fun nuggets that happen, on all of these amazing, amazing tunings that we're going on.
Fantastic.
Hmm.
Well, Britt, I know the value this has added to my life.
Mhm.
Bethany knows the value that it's added to her life and her
That's
land.
right.
And I think it's so impressive to look at the Fortune 500 companies you've worked with that create high functioning workspaces. I think it's really impressive to see the level of clients that you've done GeoTune with and the outcomes, like Michelin Key. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's kind of on the edge of doing this, I would say just run, don't walk, and give it a go and see if the outcome is something better than you dreamed of. I mean, I could not imagine having my home continue to flood.
Mhm.
And that being solved and going through seasons after that is a huge testament. Seeing
Mhm.
the revenue growth in my company is a huge testament. So both in person and from the data that's present in your Substack and on your website, it seems like a no-brainer and seems like something to invite into every practice and every project we have with permission, as you
Mhm.
say,
Mhm.
and to really allow this ancient practice of tuning the earth and living in harmony with the frequencies of the grid being placed onto our land so that we as humans can continue and to live in a space of elevated energies and become more in alignment with the land itself.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
That's the dream.